Did Hollywood accidentally bury an entire year of sci-fi failures in 2000? This was the year studios promised alien revolutions, Mars adventures, cloned humans, animated space epics, and digital nightmares. But many of them crashed harder than anyone expected. Some lost fortunes, some became punchlines. Others vanished so completely you may not believe they were once treated like the future. And one disaster still haunts sci-fi history today. Heavy Metal 2000. This was supposed to be the rebellious animated sci-fi event that brought adult fantasy roaring back, but it arrived feeling strangely out of time. In 2000, Heavy Metal 2000 tried to revive the wild spirit of the original cult anthology, but instead of feeling dangerous, strange, and unpredictable, it came across like a louder, thinner echo of something that had already shocked audiences decades earlier. The movie had space pirates, glowing artifacts, brutal planets, warrior women, and a hard rock attitude. But the problem was simple. The world had changed. Audiences had already seen bigger sci-fi spectacles, sharper animation, and darker futuristic storytelling. What once felt underground now felt oddly dated. The film leaned heavily on style, attitude, and fantasy violence, but it struggled to create the same mystery or cultural electricity as its predecessor. Today, it survives mostly as a curiosity for cult animation fans. Its failure was not just financial, it proved that nostalgia alone cannot resurrect a legend. 2001, A Space Travesty. Some sci-fi comedies fail quietly. This one failed while wearing the title of a masterpiece like a cheap costume. In 2001, A Space Travesty tried to turn futuristic space adventure into broad parody, but the result felt less like sharp satire and more like a joke stretched past its breaking point. Starring Leslie Nielsen, the film attempted to borrow the spirit of earlier spoof classics, mixing mistaken identities, lunar colonies, presidential confusion, and absurd space-age gags. But by this point, the parody formula was already showing serious fatigue. Instead of feeling clever, many jokes landed like leftovers from a different decade. The title invited comparison to 2001, A Space Odyssey, one of the most respected sci-fi films ever made, and that only made the movie feel smaller. It did not become a beloved cult comedy, nor did it dominate theaters. It became the kind of film people discover later and ask, "Wait, this actually happened?" A sci-fi spoof needs precision. This one floated away. Fortress 2, Re-entry. When a sequel sends its hero into orbit, it should feel bigger. But this one felt like a prison break trapped inside a bargain bin future. In 2000, Fortress 2. Re-entry brought Christopher Lambert back into a dystopian world of corporate control, surveillance, and futuristic punishment. The first Fortress had a gritty, low-budget charm, mixing prison movie tension with science fiction paranoia. But the sequel pushed the action into a space-based prison, a concept that sounds wild enough to be unforgettable. The problem was execution. Instead of becoming a tense, claustrophobic sci-fi thriller, it felt limited, flat, and far less urgent than the idea promised. The sets, effects, and story all carried the feeling of a sequel made more to continue a property than to expand its mythology. It had the ingredients: a controlled environment, a desperate hero, and a cold, futuristic system. But it never truly escaped its own limitations. In the end, Fortress 2 proved that going to space does not automatically raise the stakes. Highlander Endgame, a franchise built on immortals, somehow found a way to make itself feel exhausted. In 2000, Highlander Endgame attempted to unite the mythology of the films and television series, bringing Christopher Lambert's Connor MacLeod and Adrian Paul's Duncan MacLeod together for what should have been a major event for fans. On paper, it had everything: ancient warriors, family conflict, sword fights, destiny, sacrifice, and the promise of finally giving the saga emotional weight. But the movie arrived burdened by confusing continuity, uneven editing, and a story that felt more like damage control than a bold new chapter. For casual viewers, it was hard to follow. For devoted fans, it was not satisfying enough. The original Highlander had style, music, tragedy, and mythic cool. Endgame had ambition, but not the clarity or grandeur needed to revive the franchise. Instead of proving there could be only one, it proved there may have been too many sequels. Immortality apparently has limits. What planet are you from? This was the kind of strange Hollywood experiment that sounds funny in a pitch meeting, then quietly collapses when real audiences have to watch it. In 2000, What Planet Are You From? Tried to blend alien invasion, romantic comedy, gender satire, and fish-out-of-water science fiction. Gary Shandling played an alien sent to Earth with a bizarre mission involving human relationships, while Annette Bening, John Goodman, and Greg Kinnear added real star power around him. The concept had potential: an emotionless outsider studying human desire, marriage, loneliness, and modern life. But the tone was awkward. It was too strange for mainstream comedy audiences and not imaginative enough for sci-fi fans. Instead of becoming a sharp, adult satire, it felt uncomfortable, uneven, and oddly muted. The film's failure showed how risky genre blending can be when the comedy does not fully connect. Today, it feels like a time capsule of late 90s studio confidence drifting into the new millennium. The joke was cosmic. The landing was not. Hollow Man here was a blockbuster built around a terrifying idea. What happens when invisibility removes consequences from a brilliant but dangerous man? In 2000, Hollow Man arrived with major studio polish, Kevin Bacon in a sinister lead role, and Paul Verhoeven behind the camera, a director known for turning genre films into sharp, provocative spectacles. The science fiction premise was strong. A secret experiment makes a scientist invisible, and his worst instincts slowly take control. Visually, the film had moments that were genuinely impressive for its time, especially the transformation effects that showed the human body disappearing layer by layer. But the movie divided audiences and critics because its psychological darkness often gave way to more familiar thriller beats. Instead of becoming a truly disturbing exploration of power, ego, and moral collapse, it leaned into a more conventional chase-and-survive structure. Still, it remains one of the more memorable failed or flawed sci-fi thrillers of 2000. Its mini-conclusion is simple. The idea was brilliant, but the movie could not fully see its own potential. The Cell. This was not a simple sci-fi thriller. It was a nightmare dressed like an art museum. In 2000, The Cell arrived with Jennifer Lopez stepping into one of the strangest roles of her early film career, playing a psychologist who enters the mind of a dangerous, comatose man through experimental technology. The premise sounded like a futuristic psychological breakthrough, but the movie's real weapon was its imagery. Red deserts, glass chambers, unsettling costumes, and dreamlike rooms that felt pulled from a disturbed painting. That made the film unforgettable to some viewers and unbearable to others. Critics were divided because the visuals often overshadowed the story, turning the movie into more of a hypnotic gallery than a tightly controlled thriller. Still, it had ambition. It tried to make the human mind feel like alien territory, where memory, fear, and identity became physical places. Its failure was not that it lacked imagination. It may have had too much. The Cell remains a beautiful, disturbing oddity that dared to look inside darkness and came back with images people still cannot shake. The Sixth Day. Cloning should have made this movie feel dangerous, but somehow, the scariest thing about it was how normal the future looked. In 2000, The Sixth Day gave Arnold Schwarzenegger a high-concept sci-fi action vehicle built around identity theft on a biological level. He plays a man who comes home and finds that another version of himself has taken his place, opening the door to corporate conspiracy, illegal cloning, manufactured immortality, and the terrifying question of whether a copied person is still a person. On paper, that is powerful material. But the movie arrived at a moment when audiences expected Schwarzenegger to deliver huge spectacle, and this one felt caught between brainy ethical thriller and familiar action machine. It had futuristic pets, replacement bodies, shady executives, and enough big ideas to fill a darker, sharper film. Yet the emotional weight never hit as hard as the concept promised. It performed below expectations and quickly became one of Arnold's more overlooked sci-fi entries. Its best idea still works. In the future, The most frightening imposter may be yourself. Pitch Black. This one did not fail the way the others did. It survived in the dark, then slowly became stronger. In 2000, Pitch Black arrived without the giant studio confidence of the year's louder sci-fi releases, but it had something many of them lacked: a clear identity. A transport ship crashes on a hostile planet. The survivors discover that darkness brings out deadly underground creatures, and Vin Diesel's Riddick emerges as the dangerous prisoner who may be their only chance. The film was gritty, stripped down, and clever with its limitations. Instead of pretending to be a massive space epic, it turned survival into a pressure cooker. The sun-scorched planet, the fear of eclipse, and the uneasy alliance with a killer gave it a lean, nasty energy. It was not a giant blockbuster, and at first, it looked like just another modest sci-fi creature feature. But audiences remembered Riddick. That changed everything. Pitch Black is the rare entry here that turned underdog status into mythology. It proved a small sci-fi movie can outlive bigger disasters if it has one unforgettable shadow at its center. Godzilla 2000. After Hollywood's giant lizard stumble in the late 90s, Japan's Godzilla returned like a monster trying to reclaim its own name. In 2000, Godzilla 2000 reached American audiences with a very different flavor from the glossy Hollywood version that had recently disappointed many fans. This was classic Toho energy: men in suits, city destruction, military panic, alien mystery, and a creature that felt less like a misunderstood animal and more like a walking force of nature. For longtime fans, that was part of the charm. But for mainstream viewers expecting cutting-edge effects and modern blockbuster polish, it could feel old-fashioned. The movie did not become a massive international event, and outside the Godzilla fanbase, it remained more of a cult curiosity than a revival explosion. Yet its importance is easy to understand now. It reminded audiences that Godzilla was never just about scale, it was about presence, myth, and national identity. Its failure was commercial, not cultural. The monster may not have conquered the box office, but he reminded everyone who owned the roar. Mission to Mars. This was the expensive Mars movie that wanted to touch the mysteries of creation, but many viewers only felt the weight of its ambition. In 2000, Brian De Palma's Mission to Mars arrived during Hollywood's brief obsession with the Red Planet, carrying a huge budget, a serious cast, and the promise of awe-filled space exploration. The film followed astronauts investigating a disaster on Mars, slowly moving from rescue mission to cosmic revelation. It wanted to be emotional, spiritual, and scientifically grand, aiming for the kind of wonder associated with classic space cinema. But the reaction was rough. Some viewers found it slow, sentimental, and too earnest. Others admired its sweeping visuals and willingness to ask big questions about humanity's origins. The problem was expectation. Audiences came for tension and spectacle, but the movie often drifted into meditation. Its box office looked underwhelming beside its cost, and critics were split on whether it was visionary or simply overblown. Today, Mission to Mars feels like a fascinating misfire, a film reaching for the stars while stumbling over its own seriousness. Red Planet. Mars was supposed to be mankind's next great frontier, but this movie made the Red Planet feel like Hollywood's most expensive dead end. In 2000, Red Planet arrived with Val Kilmer, Carrie-Anne Moss, Tom Sizemore, and a premise built around humanity's desperate attempt to survive after Earth begins failing. The setup had everything a serious sci-fi thriller needed: a dying planet, astronauts on a dangerous mission, a mysterious robotic companion, and the terrifying loneliness of being stranded millions of miles from home. But instead of becoming a tense survival classic, the film struggled to find its own identity. It wanted to be philosophical, action-packed, scientifically curious, and scary all at once, yet none of those pieces fully locked together. The robot Amy, originally designed to help the crew, became one of the movie's more memorable threats, but even that could not save the weak reception. Audiences had already seen Mission to Mars earlier that same year, and by the time Red Planet arrived, Mars fatigue was real. Its failure proved one brutal lesson: a great destination means nothing if the journey feels empty. Supernova. Few sci-fi movies from 2000 carry the smell of studio panic quite like Supernova. This was not just another space thriller that missed the mark. It was a production that seemed troubled before audiences even had a chance to reject it. The movie followed a medical rescue ship responding to a distress signal in deep space, only to discover a dangerous survivor, a mysterious alien artifact, and a threat that could destroy everything. On paper, that sounds like the perfect recipe for claustrophobic sci-fi horror. A trapped crew, hidden motives, cosmic danger, and tension inside cold metal corridors. But behind the scenes, the film became infamous for creative clashes, reshoots, editing problems, and a final version that felt patched together rather than fully born. Walter Hill was originally involved as director, but the finished movie arrived under the name Thomas Lee, a sign that even its authorship had become uncertain. The result was glossy but hollow, expensive but strangely small. Supernova had the bones of a dangerous space nightmare, but the final film felt like a distress signal from a movie that never escaped production chaos. Titan AE. This was the animated space epic that should have launched a new future. Instead, it helped close the door on an entire studio dream. In 2000, Titan AE tried to do something bold. Combine traditional animation, computer-generated visuals, teenage rebellion, post-Earth survival, and big-screen science fiction into one sweeping adventure. The story began with Earth destroyed by an alien species, leaving humanity scattered across the stars, while a young man named Kale discovers he may hold the key to mankind's survival. With voices from Matt Damon, Drew Barrymore, Bill Pullman, and Nathan Lane, the film had scope, emotion, and a real sense of cosmic loss. But the problem was marketing. Was it for kids, teens, adults, sci-fi fans, animation lovers? The movie never found a clear audience. Its visuals were ambitious, but audiences in 2000 were moving toward fully computer-animated spectacles, and Titan AE looked caught between eras. Its box office disappointment became especially painful because Fox Animation Studios shut down soon afterward. Today, it has passionate defenders, but its original failure remains heartbreaking. It was not a bad idea. It was a future Hollywood did not know how to sell. Battlefield Earth. And then there is the disaster that did not just fail. It became a warning sign for every overconfident sci-fi epic that came after it. In 2000, Battlefield Earth arrived with huge ambition, a massive alien oppression storyline, and John Travolta throwing himself completely into the role of the towering villain Turl. Based on L. Ron Hubbard's novel, the film imagined a future where Earth has been conquered by the Cyclos, a brutal alien race that has reduced humanity to scattered survivors. That premise could have created a dark, pulpy, post-apocalyptic spectacle. Instead, the movie became infamous almost immediately. The exaggerated performances, strange costumes, tilted camera angles, muddy visuals, and awkward dialogue turned serious moments into unintentional comedy. Audiences did not embrace it. Critics attacked it. Box office numbers could not justify its cost. Over time, Battlefield Earth became more than a flop. It became a symbol. People discussed it not as a movie that merely underperformed, but as one of Hollywood's most fascinating miscalculations. Its legacy is brutal, but unforgettable. Sometimes the most ambitious futures are remembered not for how high they flew, but for how loudly they crashed. So, do you remember these failed sci-fi movies from 2000? Or did Hollywood successfully bury them in the wreckage? Some were too ambitious, some were too strange, and some became legendary for all the wrong reasons. But that is what makes them fascinating. Comment which one you actually watched and which sci-fi flop deserves a second chance.